Going for the jugular. Barack Obama refuses to apologize for his attacks on Mitt Romney, saying his election rival is bad for U.S. jobs. But what about the president's own jobs record? You're watching Inside Story US 2012 from Washington. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu. The knives are out in the US presidential race, and it is Mitt Romney who's been struggling to deal with the sustained attacks from Barack Obama. The US president and his campaign team have been relentlessly questioning the Republican candidate over the business practices of his former company, Bain Capital, which they say were bad for US jobs. It's not clear how involved Romney was in those decisions. Also at issue is the multimillionaire's personal finances. The Obama camp says Romney's reluctance to release more than 2 years' tax returns suggests he's not been paying his fair share. It's a rare show of ruthlessness from the Democratic election machine. Demands for apologies have been refused, and the Romney camp has even been told to stop whining. And it turns the tables on previous years when it was the Republicans hitting hard, like with the notorious Swift boat campaign that sunk John Kerry's presidential hopes in 2004. But as President Obama goes on the offensive about his rival's previous jobs record, there will be some tough questions to come over the rest of the campaign about his own disappointing unemployment figures. The argument over Bain has been going on for weeks now, but it's certainly been heating up over the last few days. Let's get a sense of what both sides have been saying.
Mr. Romney claims that he's Mr. Fix-It for the economy because of his business experience. And so I think voters entirely legitimately want to know, well, what exactly was that business experience?
The president's campaign has been, I think, outrageous in making the kind of charges they have. I think the kinds of attacks are beneath the dignity of the presidency. I think the president needs to rein in his campaign and start talking about the real issues people care about, which relate to our economy.
As Mitt Romney says once to his own Republican colleagues, stop whining. I give him his own advice. Stop whining.
Mitt Romney's addressed these attacks. They're false and misleading. But George, what's most disappointing about this is the president who ran as an inspirational leader. Look where we are with him right now.
No, we won't be apologizing. And I don't, sometimes these games are played during political campaigns. That company also was investing in companies that the Washington Post called pioneers of outsourcing. And he's now claiming, well, I wasn't there at the time, except he files an SEC listing that says he was the CEO, chairman, and president of the company.
He actually retired retroactively at that point, David, because he ended up not going back to the firm after his time in Salt Lake City. So he was actually retired from Bain. But look, Bain's a good company. It's been very successful. It's helped create a lot of jobs.
Will Mitt Romney's rich history be too much for voters? With me to discuss this is Chuck Rocha, Democratic strategist and senior fellow at the Center for National Policy, Bill Schneider, political analyst and distinguished senior fellow and resident scholar at Third Way. And joining us from Los Angeles, Rick Grenell, former Romney spokesman and political consultant. Gentlemen, thanks to all of you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, as we just saw, the campaign is getting increasingly bitter, more personal from both sides, and a lot of it has been focusing on Mitt Romney's time at Bain Capital, the private equity firm that he ran. Obama is making the point that under Romney, a number of jobs, thousands of jobs, were outsourced. Bill Schneider, is the president onto a winner here?
Well, it's the only way he's going to win this race. He's got to destroy confidence in Mitt Romney. The polls show people don't really like or trust Mitt Romney, and the president is running hard on that, which means he has to do something that's not natural for him. At least we didn't see it in 2008. He's got to run a pretty harsh, negative campaign. But he shows every intention of doing that because, frankly, it's the only way he's going to win.
And he's shifting the focus away from his own record.
That's part of the point.
Okay. Let's go to Rick Grenell. He's in Los Angeles. Rick, how much of a problem has Bain become for Mitt Romney?
Well, I think it's shameful that we try to demonize a wealthy guy. Let's face it, Mitt Romney is very wealthy. He's been very successful. The idea that the media, though, are reporting on the fact that he's only released 2 years of his tax returns, they're really playing right into what the Obama camp wants. Let's call it for what it is. If Mitt Romney released 3 or 4 years of taxes, the Democrats would call for 6 or 8 years to be released. They don't want to look inside his taxes. They want a political win. They want a game. They want to distract the voters, and that's exactly what the media are playing into. Why are we demonizing someone who's wealthy? This is crazy. This is America. We should respect that, and we should give Mitt Romney the credit for successfully having a company that created a lot of jobs.
But aren't part of those demands coming from the fact that, Mitt Romney's campaigning on the fact that he was a businessman and that he has the experience necessary to run the country from a business point of view? Therefore, those tax returns...
He does. He understands the economy.
Right, and therefore those tax returns become pertinent to his campaign rhetoric.
Why? He's released 2 years of that. What are you looking for? What are you suggesting?
Well, the accusations that have been made against him is that maybe he's got something to hide there. Maybe he didn't pay his fair share.
Oh, come on.
That's not coming from me. That's coming from...
No one is suggesting that.
That's not coming from me. That's coming from the other side.
If someone is suggesting that they should stand up and make that accusation.
Okay, let's go.
The simple fact is that Mitt Romney has been very clear about 2 years of his tax returns, and I think that's plenty.
Okay, Chuck?
I would absolutely agree with Rick that Mitt Romney is a very successful businessman. Mm-hmm. And so I've spent my lifetime running elections, working for people. Mitt Romney, just like Barack Obama, has to figure out how to relate with the people who are going to make the biggest difference in this election. You're talking about a few 100,000 people in a few battleground states, most of which are probably blue-collar workers. I feel pretty confident that Mitt Romney has locked down the rich vote. But what he has to do is go after middle America and say, I get you, I understand you, and you should trust me and not trust Barack Obama. And so why he needs to take this off the front page of every newspaper is because every average blue-collar working-class people in Ohio or Virginia see these ads, which are devastating, and say, I don't even know where the Cayman Islands are. I don't know what it is to have a bank account in Switzerland. That's no attack on Mitt Romney.
Let me just say,
Go ahead, Rick.
What's really silly about this is no poor man has ever hired any of us. You have to be wealthy to create jobs or have a business. And let's just look at what Barack Obama has delivered for the last 4 years to convince anyone that he doesn't know what he's doing. We put a community organizer into the White House and he doesn't know how to create jobs. I think that Mitt Romney, I would agree with Chuck, that I think that Mitt Romney has to be able to look at the blue-collar voters and say, you may not understand me, but I want you to be just as successful as me. And this is America, and I want to put in place the policies that allow everyone to have the opportunity to become rich.
Bill?
I think that's the message, because that's a message that people would jump on.
Well, the message that people are getting is what you, Anand, mentioned just a moment ago. What is Mitt Romney hiding? Why doesn't he release his tax returns? Is there something there we're not supposed to see? How did he make all that money?
Well, that's because the media are falling for the Obama talking points. I mean,
that's not an Obama talking point. That's not an Obama talking point. The voters want to know why he does not release his tax returns. And also, what was that money doing in the Cayman Islands?
The Obama talking point, Bill, the Obama talking point is to talk about something other than the fact that 1 in 7 Americans are on food stamps, that we have unemployment at 8.2%, and that Barack Obama has given us a downgrade of the economy for the first time in history. What the Obama campaign wants to do is talk about 2 years of a tax release not being enough and all these silly side issues. The American people are hurting, and the American people should demand that the media not immediately fall for the Obama talking points of talking about anything other than Obama's record, because it's dismal.
If it's an Obama talking point, that doesn't mean it's not a real question. It is a real question.
Okay, Chuck, let me ask you about something else.
I didn't say that. Of course,
Rick, I'll get back to you.
It could be a real
I'll
question.
get to you in a moment, Rick. Chuck, let me go to you. There's also been quite a bit of debate over the last few days over what exactly Romney did at Bain between the years 1999 to 2001. He says he wasn't there, but records show that he was actually. To use the various definitions that have been given to us, he was the sole shareholder, the sole director, the chief executive officer and president of the company. This was during a time when a number of jobs were outsourced.
So whether he was there or whether he wasn't there, he was still associated with these people at Bain. He helped run Bain, whether he left 2 years before, 2 years after, whether he signed or not signed. Let's get down to the fact of the issue of if you are living in Union City, Tennessee, and your factory closed 6 months ago, and that tire production moved to China. This is a real story. If you're sitting at home in Union City and you see the attack ads, and you see that Bain had something to do, whether Mitt Romney was there or not. This is the way business works in America. Just like Rick said, there never was a poor person who hired anybody. It's all determined on how you run that business. And that should be reflective, and you should be full disclosure if you want to be our president, because this is something about your character and how you run a business. If you want to get to these blue-collar workers, you want to get to average, everyday Americans, you need to be able to relate with them and say, there's a way to run a business without sending jobs overseas.
Okay. Rick, should not have Mitt Romney, when he knew the day he was going to be running for president, and he probably knew this the day that John McCain conceded, should he have not come out and said, look, I ran Bain, here are all my records, this is what I did, get it out of the way. Now he's given the opposition a chance to bring it up.
I disagree. I think what Mitt Romney has to do is he has to come out and not apologize for who he is. He's a wealthy guy who's been very successful. I think the simple fact is that if you look at what he was charged with at Bain, he was charged with to make companies successful. He had an obligation to the shareholders, and he was very good at that. To somehow now change the criteria for what he was supposed to do at Bain as the CEO, to say that he wasn't supposed to create jobs globally, I think is really ridiculous. We need to come back to American values and not apologize for the fact that American workers can compete anywhere. We don't want a country that just says we only can have jobs that are in the United States, because our economy is moving globally. So we have to have a president who understands that we can't lock down the country and just try to not compete against all these other countries around the world. It's a losing strategy that Obama has us on.
Well, look, his responsibility to his shareholders, which Rick just mentioned, was not to create jobs. It was to create wealth.
Right.
That's why they invested in the company.
Well,
now,
Bill,
when you
come on,
create
that's how you
wealth,
create
sometimes you
wealth.
create jobs, and
You
sometimes
think you
you
just
eliminate
create
jobs.
wealth without creating jobs?
Okay,
No,
but
that's
Rick-
silly.
Yes, you can.
Rick-
You can create wealth by
But
eliminating
Rick,
jobs.
surely, I mean, you must acknowledge that voters are going to see a disconnect between someone who's saying, I'm going to create jobs in the United States, and someone who has in the past created jobs in other countries.
I don't think that they will see a disconnect if Mitt Romney is somebody who's out there making the case, because clearly we have to educate Americans on a global economy. I would argue till the end of the day that we cannot have a country that just says you can only create a job here. We want companies, we want American companies that are strong. We want American companies that can compete everywhere. I want an American company that also has offices around the world, because those are jobs that then come back to the United States. We are the leader. And we need somebody who can absolutely present that message and educate the voters, because if we just want only jobs
Rick,
in the United
I would
States,
disagree
we're
on
gonna
one
be
point that you talk about Barack Obama in the record. Barack Obama can stand at a podium and talk about saving the U.S. auto industry. And do we want to sell those cars overseas? By all means. But one of every 4 jobs in Ohio are tied to the U.S. auto industry. Those workers in Ohio know that. That's why Barack Obama continually goes back to Ohio to remind them of that. And then when they go home and they turn on their TV, they see other jobs that Bain Capital has outsourced. There's going to be a disconnect between the voters. You've run political races and I've run political races. This is a smart ad to run because people react to that.
I think those same workers in Ohio and Tennessee and Kentucky are coming home and they're saying, we don't have any more coal or mining jobs because Barack Obama has decided to get rid of those jobs. So for every job that you can pretend that Barack Obama has saved, I can talk about all the ones that he's eliminated or have downgraded or really have put people on the unemployment line. The record shows that this guy in the White House doesn't know what he's doing. We need a businessman. We need somebody like Mitt Romney who understands the economy, who can create real jobs, whether those jobs are here or they're based here and they're selling to global customers.
Okay, well, we talked about Romney's taxes earlier on. Now, that debate over Romney's taxes is showing no signs of dying down. On Tuesday morning, the Obama campaign unveiled its latest attack ad targeting the Republican candidate. Let's watch.
I'm Barack Obama, and I approve this message.
Tax havens, offshore accounts, carried interest. Mitt Romney has used every trick in the book. Romney admits that over the last 2 years, he's paid less than 15% in taxes on $43 million in income. Makes you wonder if some years he paid any taxes at all. We don't know because Romney has released just 1 full year of his tax returns and won't release anything before 2010.
You know what? I put out as much as we're going to put out.
What is Mitt Romney hiding?
That's the question that's on voters' minds. It is also an Obama talking point, but it's a talking point largely because voters are asking precisely that question. Why doesn't he reveal that information? And many Republicans have urged Mitt Romney to do that. Their point is, you're going to have to release it sooner or later.
Right.
It's better to do it now.
Earlier. What about that, Rick?
Again, I think this is just a silly issue. We have a nominee who has released 2 years of his taxes. Everything is legal. And if the Obama team is actually suggesting that something illegal has been done with his taxes, they should stand up and say it. But they're not saying that. They're just trying to play this as a political win. I will say this. If Barack Obama and his team think that it's outrageous that wealthy people are able to hire tax accountants and get around the tax code and the law all legally with loopholes, then they should have tried to close those loopholes the first 2 years in office when they controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House. I don't think it's I don't think it's fair for the media to question Mitt Romney's loopholes, so to speak, is what the way Obama has been saying it. I don't think it's fair, and not say, why hasn't President Obama tried to close these?
Let's be clear about something real quick. These ads just don't metamorphosize out of thin air. There's a reason why Barack Obama is running these ads. So they do polling, they do talking to voters, they do focus groups that says that their people will react to this issue. So they're out there doing what is the number one, and Bill knows this, the number one thing you do, defining the candidate, right? If you're a rich businessman running for president and you don't release your records, and you've been tied to a corporation that moves jobs overseas, you don't want this on the front page of the paper. Don't be surprised if he starts talking about a VP candidate like you already did today, just to take this off the page, to have people talk about something else.
Right, and the other thing that Barack Obama is doing, and up to this point it would seem successfully, is to define Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is allowing him to do that.
Yes, and look at what we've been talking about for this show so far. We've been talking about 90% about Mitt Romney. Now, Rick is right that Obama's record is supposed to be the central issue in this campaign, and it almost certainly will be by the time the voters vote in November. It'll be a referendum on President Obama, and his results so far have been disappointing. Now, if he asks people, are you better off than you were when I took office in 2009, most voters, if they think about it, would probably say yes, but they still find the results of his policies disappointing. He didn't deliver what he said he would deliver, and they don't really believe that his policies have been working. That's the real issue in this campaign, and look at how successfully he's managed to deflect attention away from that.
Right, and Mitt Romney did focus on that in the earlier part of the campaign when he kept saying, look, for the last, I think it was something like 42 months or perhaps a little bit longer, the unemployment rate has been above 8%. Right. This from a president who told us that it was his aim, his goal, to reduce it, to bring it under 8%.
Well, that's right. Obama, things have gotten a little better under Obama. His argument has to be, if it weren't for my policies, we would have fallen into a depression. It's hard to run for re-election on the theme, you know, it could have been worse.
Right.
No one is better under this president, let's face it. I think the Obama campaign is making two very fundamental mistakes. One, they're having all of this discussion about Bain and taxes in July. No one is paying attention. It's before the convention. It's going to be wiped off the map. Do you think that we're still going to be talking about these issues in October? No. What we're going to be talking about in October is the fact that unemployment is still above 8%. This economy has been downgraded, and people, 1 in 7 Americans are on food stamps. This community organizer in the White House doesn't know what he's doing, and we've got to get rid of him. He needs to be a one-term president in order for us to create jobs and get someone out of the way who just wants to spend money.
Another way this is being framed, Chuck, is, and we heard this from Paul Krugman, the Princeton economist, is also a columnist for the New York Times. He says that this election is about the rich versus the rest, or to put it another way, as we've heard so often, the 1% versus the 99%. Obama wants to tax the rich. Mitt Romney wants to extend tax cuts to the rich. Is that a good definition of the way it looks right now?
This is about an election. I wish I could say it was all about public policy, and I think a small portion of it is about public policy. But as I started this conversation, it's about winning an election. So you have a small group of people, I'll say it again, who will determine the outcome in a small, minute number of states. And it's making that connection. The more they can draw a contrast with 99% plus the wealthy, which is the connection me and Rick have been debating on whether they'll vote for him because he's wealthy or they hold a grudge because he's wealthy. Regardless of that, people still are going to make a decision on who they trust. And to Bill's point, they're going to think, am I really better off? Am I okay? Do I trust the policy positions, if they take time to even know that Mitt Romney's talking about? But it's going to come down to likability and who they trust with even three small groups of people. Independent women,
I think it's
Latinos,
a little different this time.
and with blue-collar workers. Sorry, Rick, go ahead.
I
Why
think
is
it's
it
a little different this time. I think that this election is about the American way of life. And I think people have really seen that we've changed fundamentally over the last 4 years under Obama. We've had class warfare. We've had making fun of the rich. We've told, President Obama has told small business owners that they really didn't create their companies and that they really had all this help that maybe they didn't have. I think people are sensing that this is about the American way of life and that we have to get back to allowing people to become wealthy, to live the American dream and not be denigrated for it.
Go ahead, Bill.
To become wealthy. My goodness. Look, this election, one of the most interesting characteristics of it is we haven't seen any change in the polls in about 6 months since it was clear that Romney would be the nominee. They really haven't budged. They've been neck and neck with Obama slightly ahead.
Okay.
The basic condition of this election is Americans do not think that Obama's policies have shown real results. They haven't paid off, but they don't trust Romney and they don't think, and they're not sure what he's hiding. They don't really like him very much. That's a very difficult choice.
I think
It's
if we
really
trusted
Okay,
polls, we'd have
just
President
one moment,
Kerry.
Rick. We're running out of time. I just want to get to one last issue, and this is the fun stuff. Let's take a look at some of the names being suggested as in the running for Romney's vice presidential pick. It's a guessing game at this stage. Those being most talked about are the former Minnesota governor and rival presidential candidate Tim Pawlenty, Ohio Senator Rob Portman, and the Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal. But also mentioned have been the Florida Senator Marco Rubio, the Wisconsin Congressman Paul Ryan, and even the former Secretary of State under George W. Bush, Condoleezza Rice. Bill, I want to ask you a broad question on the vice presidential pick. I mean, how does one decide on the vice presidential pick? Do you look at universal appeal throughout the country, like Condoleezza Rice, or do you choose someone who can bring his state with him? And in that case, I would imagine someone like Rob Portman would look very attractive to Mitt Romney because he's in Ohio, which is a swing state. It's a vital state, key state. Where do you think they'd be looking?
Well, I say that there are 10 reasons why you pick a vice president. Reason number 1, pick someone who will help you win. The other 9 reasons don't matter. Okay. That's all. Your mind is so completely focused on winning, nothing else really matters. But does a vice president really help you win? You can't prove that any vice president made a difference since LBJ, Lyndon Johnson, back in 1960, who was crucial to allowing John Kennedy to carry Texas, without which he wouldn't have won. Yeah. Since then, no vice presidential pick has really made a decisive difference. And to your point, who predicted that Bush would pick Cheney? Who predicted that McCain would pick Palin? Who predicted that the first President Bush would pick Dan Quayle? I can predict how 150 million voters are going to vote more easily than I can predict how Mitt Romney is going to make up his mind.
Okay, let's go to Rick. Where's this going to go, Rick?
You know, I don't think where you come from, what state the vice president comes from matters. If you look, Biden is from Delaware, Cheney is from Wyoming. It just doesn't matter anymore. I think that you've got to have somebody who is a team player with you. And I think from what I know about Governor Romney, he wants somebody that can step in and help on budget economic issues because this country needs it. And my prediction is that he'll pick Rob Portman, who can really step in and make some of those tough decisions and help us get the economy back in shape.
In my opinion, if I was, and obviously I haven't been asked to be an advisor to Mitt Romney, but if I was doing it, it was kind of what Bill said, but here's my thoughts on how they can help him win outside of states, which we know haven't mattered, back to my home state of Texas and LBJ, is that Mitt Romney needs to pick somebody that he is not. Somebody who, when he's out on the stump, can tell the other side of the story. I think about a John Thune in South Dakota. Even though it's a small state, a guy who grew up from meager means, has rose up through the ranks, so somebody who can tell that story.
He's going to bring someone with qualities that he doesn't have.
Right, that's what Barack Obama did.
I don't think
he
so.
he got an elder statesman. He got somebody who knew Washington. Barack Obama was new. There was a lot of knocks on him for not knowing his way around Washington. So he picked somebody who complimented him. I think if I was a strategist for Mitt Romney, I would pick somebody who compliments what he don't know. It's part of the points that Rick made. I would make them more adversely and talk about somebody who can relate better with working Americans, maybe somebody who's not quite as wealthy, to tell that story.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Time's caught up with us. Chuck, Bill, and Rick, thanks to all of you for joining us. And that is it from the team here in Washington, D.C. for now. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, where you can find more information about the program. And of course, we want to hear from you. Tell us what stories you think we should be covering. Send your ideas directly to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net.